All right, everyone. Thank you for tuning into the Honest Defense podcast. Today, my guest is Ryan MacDonald. Ryan is a professional MMA fighter. He's a UFC veteran with a professional record of 11-2. He's the owner and coach of 691 on One MMA Fitness in his hometown of North Platte, Nebraska. And he's coming off an impressive finish last week at Art of Scrap 3 against fellow UFC veteran Willie Gates. Ryan, thanks so much for being here, man. It's an honor.
Heck yeah, likewise, man. It's super cool just to get you reaching out. I don't know if you're from Fort Wayne, but you'll have to fill me in on your story. But it's really cool that you reached out and then we can do this.
Yeah, I got family in Fort Wayne, and so I heard there was a fight in town, and so I try to get to as many fights as I can, and saw your fight. We sat next to a couple guys from your gym, so it was cool kind of getting to talk to them. So I was already rooting for you before I even saw you, and your fight was just incredible. And I want to get into all of those details because the way you handled the fight and the poise that you had after taking a couple big hits, it was incredible, man. It was exhilarating to watch that fight. So first, tell me, so the fight was a week ago now. Tell me how the recovery's going and how you're feeling after that.
Yeah, it's crazy. Honestly, the fight feels like it was like 2, maybe 3 days ago. It's crazy that it's already been 7 whole days, you know? Yeah, the recovery is the toughest part because I enjoy training so much that, I got to come back right into coaching and got to do that. But I enjoy training so much and your legs are beat up after fights, your hands hurt, I can't do any sparring for quite some time because I got put on my butt and just to be the smarter athlete, I need to take care of my brain and take recovery time from physical contact like punching and stuff like that. And we actually got guys competing on Thursday this upcoming week on Veterans Day. So it's tough because they're all priming to go and I have to kind of take the back step and just play coach for right now. But I enjoy both sides of the game. So.
And it seems like that's really evolved, from kind of the earlier days of MMA, that guys are smarter about the recovery and realizing, hey, I can't go 100% all the time because I got to protect my body, protect my brain, because that's all part of your career.
It is, yeah. And I've seen it time and time again when you take a big knockdown like that and then you hop into a cage 2 months later, 3 months later, and the same thing happens, or worse, you get knocked out because that's your biggest muscle and it's just swelling inside your head. So yeah, you got to take care of it for sure.
So what have you been doing the past 7 days? Is it a lot of, I know you have a Twitch stream. Is it just a lot of hanging out, playing video games? Is there something you're doing actively to help yourself recover?
Yeah. So I wish I could say that I've just been gaming out, but I've been so tired that really it's just a bunch of eating and coaching. And that's been the kind of the last couple of days for me. And obviously the travel, we got to, I drive up to Fort Wayne a lot, just because I love to stop in Chicago and stuff like that and just get to travel. And my parents, I was kind of sheltered as a kid and my parents got to go up there and we've never had deep dish Chicago style pizza. And we're a big pizza family. So it was cool afterwards eating with my nephew, my brother, my family. And yeah, it was awesome.
Where'd you go?
We went to Geno's, I believe.
Okay. Yeah, that's a good spot. That's a good spot. Yeah. Awesome. So I want to talk more about the fight, but I always like to ask people about kind of how they grew up because that always fascinates me, how your childhood led to where you are now. So talk to me about growing up in North Platte and what your childhood was like. Were you a fighter as a kid? Tell me all that.
Yeah, I like to say that I was the toughest of my brothers. But I think it came from the kind of the school I was in. We went to like the smaller of the elementary schools and kind of like we lived on the side of town where there was a bunch of trailer parks. I grew up in a trailer park. So it was a lot of tough kids and growing up that way. And I remember a certain point where my oldest brother put me and my best friend at the time in our backyard and made us box when we were in kindergarten. And we both ran to our parents crying, like, they made us fight. Our older brothers made us fight. And we went home, we went to school the next day with black eyes and they were like, what happened? Why'd you guys get into a fight? And then we told the whole story and we made up. We were friends again. But
was the purse at least good? Did they pay you well?
No purse. It was on a mattress. and it was like, if you don't beat each other up, then we're gonna beat you up.
Oh
And my
God.
oldest brother's 5 years older than me, so yeah, it was like, okay, but
Right.
and like I said, I like to think that I was the toughest brother because my brothers didn't get into fights.
Yeah.
My brothers were just they would talk a lot of crap and pen it off on me, push it off on me. So yeah, that's it was weird growing up.
I got a younger brother too, and he always likes to blame me for all of his scars. He always likes to bring up all the stories about me creating games that only I could win. And I say he's a doctor in the Air Force now. He's doing pretty well. I made him the man he was. So I think if I'm going to take your older brother's side, I'm going to say they built you to be a
Yeah,
professional fighter, man. How many brothers
totally.
do you have?
I have two brothers, a step brother and a stepsister.
Okay, okay. And so when did you start training formally in martial arts?
Uh, well, I boxed for a summer, my freshman, coming off my freshman year of high school. Um, did that for a summer, and I was kind of one of those kids that you see that pops in the gym that, might come one day a week or something, and so I really struggled with discipline and staying just active, staying consistent, and so I did that and I really enjoyed it, but it was because of the friend group that I had. They were all boxers. They were competing. I had some buddies that did really well in the Golden Gloves tournament, and just seeing that and being kind of the out of my friend group, I was the softest of all of us, and I would get picked on by all my friends, and they just kind of take turns beating me up, and again, it kind of made me the man I am, and it's funny that we all joke around about it now because of all the guys that would have been fighters, it wouldn't have been me.
Right.
I rode with like some tough guys who all my friends were Mexican and had really Hispanic backgrounds, and growing up and hanging out with their families, and kind of like it was a different culture because I come from a white family, and you just don't see a lot of boxers. Mexican families, there's a lot of boxers in the family, and so I think in a sense at that early age I seen those people, and seen my friends competing, and it just kind of inspired me, like subconsciously. I didn't put a lot of thought into it, but now that I'm doing it, I just enjoy it and love it to death.
Were you always, because if I remember your stats right, I think you're 5'11" and you fight at 135 pounds. Were you always just kind of the skinny kid growing up? Is that
I
when
was,
you said
yeah,
you weren't going to be the fighter? It was just because of that.
yeah. Hold on, I'll see if I can pull up a picture. 'Cause I got a picture on my wall here.
I gotta see it. Because that, I mean, to me, that alone takes some kind of discipline just to be able to maintain that weight.
Okay, let's see if I can find my look at my senior picture. Right. Goodness sakes.
Yeah, yeah, okay. So maybe it's not a lot of discipline to maintain that weight. Maybe that's just your
There
natural
was,
metabolism.
there was the basketball pick,
Okay.
real scrawny, I same height, yeah, just a real scrawny kid.
Oh, that's funny. So how did you go? Were you watching like UFC? Were you watching MMA back then, or were you strictly boxing?
um, we were watching MMA, but I don't even think I realized it was a sport. Like that's how young and naive I was. I mean, I seen we played a lot of the video games and stuff, but yeah, I don't think I ever like saw it as a career path until I started training, and that was my junior year, and then I started, training, and went to a local gym that was downtown, and it was open for about, shoot, I think 2 months probably while I was there, and then it ended up closing down. They had been going for a while, but yeah, once I started training, I was just like, this is so cool, and
Yeah.
it just, I loved. There's not a lot of people that enjoy losing, but like every time somebody would catch me in a submission or hit me with something I'd never seen, it was just like such a curious mind, and I'm like, man, this is crazy. Show me that,
That's the only way you get better is you have to have that curiosity. You know, the people who take losses so harshly and so personally aren't the ones that learn and grow from it. You have to be able to be like, oh man, he got me. How did he get me? I want to know, I want
Yeah.
to learn that so I can do that to someone else and make sure it doesn't happen to me again. I mean, I think that's the only mindset you can have to be successful when you're
Yeah.
doing, I mean, not just even martial arts, I think anything if you're trying to
Anything in
grow.
life. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So you started out boxing. Were you thinking of boxing as a career, or did you have another idea of what you wanted to do after high school?
I think in high school I was so like fixated on basketball. I really loved basketball, and you could catch me at the rec center probably 5 days a week, you know, shooting hoops and playing basketball with my friends. But um
So you thought it'd be weird for a white kid to go into boxing, but not weird to go into basketball.
right, right. And the thing was is I was really good like at basketball skill wise, but as a team thing, I could never make it work. For whatever reason, me and the kids on the team, we didn't really click at the time. I mean, we all do now, but I was kind of an awkward, anxious kid, and didn't really know how to talk. And when you're raised with a bunch of Mexican friends and African American friends, like I had this chip on my shoulder, and I was acting different because of the tough crew that I hung out with. And so a lot of the kids on the basketball team was like, this kid's a dork. You know, they had names for me. Like they would call me Wigger, and they would call me GU Not and stuff like that. And they would make fun of the way that I acted because I wore baggy pants yeah, it's just different. So
And that's some people are just built. I can only compare it to you. I've done a little bit of stand up and I've done a little bit of acting. And what I love about stand up versus acting is that it's just me on that stage with my material that I've created. So I don't have to rely on anyone else, and I don't have anyone else to blame. It's
right.
100% me. And when I do acting, I'm like, you got to worry about everyone else and how the cast clicks. You got to worry about them learning their lines and worry about how you're reading someone else's lines.
You know,
There's something I like about that individual pursuit of, hey, it's all on me for better and for worse. And I just think
it
that's a
takes
personality thing.
that's why you see like these teams, these really good basketball teams, and these really good teams in general in sports. They have to have such a good connection, like personally and individually, that for these things to like go right.
Yeah.
And that's why, yeah, fighting's awesome because it's
Yeah.
just a solo sport, and you don't have to worry about all that. But as much I need to give props to the guys that cornered me. They're two of my students, and I thought they did a phenomenal job, and probably my best corners and so far, like as far as my whole career. I've been fighting since 2012, and they did such an awesome job. And I thought that it was the first time them both being in the corner together, and them having like the leadership role of commanding the corner, and they did such a great job. And I was sweating it a little bit for them, that because they have a lot of respect for me and they don't want to mess up. So I thought that they were going to get nervous and overly anxious and kind of mess up certain things, like bringing in the water and just certain things like that, and what you say to your athlete when they're competing. But they just did such a great job, and it was really cool to see.
Well, it's obvious you had such a good strategy because early on, you stood and you traded shots with him for a while, and he got a couple good ones in, and then eventually you took him down, and I think you realized, oh, you could completely control him. You got him in this body lock that he just didn't know how to get out of, didn't know what to do, and it seemed like you stuck to that strategy. Once you realized you had him there, you stuck to that strategy in the later rounds, and that's how you ended up being able to finish him because you just absolutely controlled him on the ground.
Yeah, and ideally, I don't like to go into a fight thinking like this is a game, the game plan. This is what I got to stick to, because we all know those change. And like I came out, my game plan, I was going to throw front kicks because I knew that he liked to throw front kicks. And in my eyes, I thought I was a better front kicker. So I wanted to bait out his front kicks and then have some counters. And then the fight just completely did not go that way, right? And so you have to just adapt on the fly, and it's so crazy, yeah. To like, I don't know what it is about me and how I recover from some of these shots, but it's nearly the same every time I get put on my butt, and it's been 3 times now. Every time I get put on my butt, I fall the same way, I look so focused. Like if go back and watch the fight, once I get dropped, it's like that's a scary moment for most people, but for whatever reason, you can like see the focus in my face and in my eyes, and it's just weird. It's just a
Yeah.
weird thing to still. Thank God I haven't been knocked unconscious yet, but and I'm sure my day's coming. But it's one of those things that the way that I fall and the way that I'm able to recover, it's really like amazing to me that I can keep fighting through, and there's so many mental games just in that fight alone. I think I thought about quitting 8 times. Like I have this weird thing in my head where I count every time I think about quitting, because I think we all go through it, and I don't, maybe it's just me, but I think we all go through it in these fights, and I think you have to like make peace with that quitting feeling, and just be like, that's not you, because I've had one time ever that I felt I just gave up, and it was as an amateur, and I didn't train hard, right? And that in that camp leading up to it, I just didn't put in the work that I should have, and I learned a lot, and I used to hang the little all access pass up in my car just to remind me every day to work hard in the gym. And I think it's a Vince Lombardi quote. You hear it a lot. The harder you work, the harder it is to surrender. And that's how, it feels when I get put down like that. It's like, I've worked too hard to just give up.
And I think what you said is so important about how you have to make peace with that feeling of wanting to give up. You don't ignore it. You don't push it to the side. You say, hey, I know I have these feelings and I'm going to accept them, but I'm not going to let them beat me. I'm going to beat these feelings. And I know that's going to be in me and that's going to be a part of me. And I'm just going to have to overcome it every single time, because it seems like when you get those feelings and you try to ignore them and shove them aside, that's kind of when they get bigger and bigger and can overtake you, because you get overwhelmed by it. They kind of come at you by surprise. But
Mm-hmm.
acknowledging it early on and just saying, hey, I don't care, I'm going to overcome this.
Mm-hmm.
That's how you're able to actually say, I'm pushing through, and I'm going to, even if it comes up 8 times in a fight, I can overcome.
It's weird. Like even when I was in dominant positions, your head plays this game with you. Like, is he just playing possum? Is he waiting for me to make a mistake? And then you start, just thinking all these things when you should be focused on, finishing the fight because you're in a dominant position. And it's just so wild that you could be completely winning a fight and still thinking about, I could go home and, be fine. Because when you got people that love you at home, and people that, when you're secure with yourself, I think that those ideas become like, oh, I could just go home, it's fine, but if you've quit once, you know how to deal with that. I feel like you need make peace with it, and just confront those demons and be like, hey, I'm going to shut him up. I mean, Rose Namajunas, she's fighting tonight. She talks about it a lot. She talks about just everything that goes into the fight, and there's so much mind power. And every time your head tells you something negative, you just got to bark at it and say, shut up, and tell yourself something positive, and give yourself those affirmations. But I don't think enough fighters, they come to peace with that early enough. It might take a hard fight to get them there, but you can't run through everybody, I'll tell you that much.
Right. Is that something you think that people can train? Because I've seen, when you got knocked down, I've seen high level UFC fighters get knocked down like that and the fight's over. For you to be able to come back up and then to dominate the rest of the fight, is that something that's, you think, naturally in you? Is that something that comes from having to fight your friend on a mattress when you're 5 years old and just that's been your life? Where do you think that comes from?
Yeah, I think a little bit of both. I think that the harder you train, like it just means so much more to me. This whole fighting stuff, I feel like in general, I wake up thinking about fighting. I go to sleep thinking about fighting. Um, I go to sleep thinking about my students and how I can make them better. So just personally, the things in life that life has thrown at me, martial arts has helped me keep my head on straight, and not think about everything that life wants you to, you know, to drag you down with. And it's just like, if that's the only thing that really means a lot to me, like my students, my in-home life, my school, my own career, if I can just focus on those things, then the rest of life's challenges, they can't bring me down. They can't keep me down. They can bring me down, but they can't keep me down.
I say that all the time when I try to talk people into getting into jujitsu. I say it's the one thing I do where my mind shuts off from everything else and I'm 100% present. Because when there's a guy on your back trying to
Yeah,
choke you unconscious, you can't think of anything else. And
exactly.
it's weird to describe it as a peace, but it really is a peace that you have because you're. I think especially in the world today, your mind's in 1,000 different places for anyone, and this one task that you have is the one time where you're like, I will die if I'm not 100% focused, and so
Yep.
it forces you to just be present right there,
Right.
and we
Yeah.
don't have a whole lot of that. So that's to me, that's the number one aspect of martial arts that I love.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, 100%. And
So,
jujitsu in general, I think that more people need that. As well as I do that you come home feeling like you got hit with a ton of bricks, and all the things that you're questioning, like why did I get caught in that arm bar? You know, it just makes you a better human because you're forced to acknowledge yourself as a whole. And if you don't, you keep getting beat up and you
yeah,
keep getting beat up.
yeah,
And it takes a special person to get beat up and come back. I've seen so many people just being a gym owner, in and out, right? And they'll come try it out. They'll tell me how much they loved it, and then I'll never see them again,
yeah.
right? And it's like, okay, if you really love it, you're gonna be content with getting beat up every single day and then
Yeah.
coming right back.
It's we were talking about this earlier. I mean, I think it's an ego thing. Is that you have to be willing to say, I'm okay getting beat up and losing because that's how I'm going to get better and that's how I'll learn. That's the only way you're ever going to learn. You have to check that ego from day one when you start because
And then it,
it's a year, it's 2 years of literally just getting choked up, choked out every single day, and even after that, you're still losing pretty often.
oh yeah, yeah. There's always somebody out there better than you, and some conflicting style that can deal with you, no
Yeah.
problem.
Yeah. So coming from a boxing background, what was getting into jujitsu like? Learning that grappling because I would have guessed that you had the jujitsu background from that fight. Again, the way
Mhm.
you sunk in that body triangle and controlled him on the ground was black belt level. So I'm curious when jujitsu kind of came into that and how you took to that coming from a striking background.
Yeah, I think it just made more sense to me because being the little guy, uh, you're able to win more in jujitsu than in kickboxing, right? Like I know right now I got a 205 pounder getting ready for a fight, and we kickbox all the time. But I know that if he was really trying to knock my head off with a punch, he probably could, right? Just because of weight and size, right? But in jujitsu, it's just a whole different game. These guys, like I don't have to be so worried on the ground with somebody who's 205 pounds, like, or 245 pounds. Once we're getting above like 300, then it gets a little different. But I mean, jujitsu, as a little guy, there's so many avenues that I go based off of how big and strong my opponent is and their base and stuff like that. And if they're my size, I can do effectively my own style, right? But I have to have a different style based on who I'm rolling with. And with bigger guys, I have like my go-to moves that I do to every big guy, and it's like it works nearly every time, depending on skill level. And so, like it just it makes more sense to me that I can hang with these bigger guys and yeah, just being the smaller guy, you have to find something to deal with these bigger guys
Yep.
because and my gym when I first started, it was the closest guy to me was 175 pounds, I think, and I was a buck 35, walking around, and so yeah, it's just you have to figure those things out and figure those things out quick because the bigger man is just it's such an advantage and there are advantages for littler guys too. We squirm out of things easier. We have more speed, stuff like that. But I think that if we're talking on a scale like a big scale, size and weight are way more of an advantage than speed and stuff like that. So
Yeah. And that's jujitsu to me has always been the great equalizer. That's why I love it because I'm about 20 pounds heavier than you, but significantly shorter. So I was always a smaller guy too,
right.
and learning there are ways that I can beat a bigger guy in a fight if I have to. It
Hmm.
gives you some confidence, and
It
it
does.
makes you in a way having that confidence makes you less likely to fight. Because
Hmm.
you're like, all right, I know I can take care of myself if I have to. I don't need
Yeah.
to go out and try to prove anything. And I recommend that to and when I talk to parents who have smaller kids, I say you got to get them into some sort of grappling, if it's wrestling, jujitsu, whatever, because that's where you can learn as a smaller guy how to control a fight.
Yeah. 100%.
So talk to me about when did you decide, hey, I think I can really pursue this? Like, what was that first time you said, I want to compete in MMA? I want to actually fight someone.
So at first it was just training because again it did so much for me like starting out and I was always the littler guy and hanging out with friends. I would go into a party and I just feel like everybody's like kind of looking down on you like oh there's whoever it may be just because they when you get sized up and you feel insecure you're like oh man I'm the little guy in here and so I didn't feel confident a lot of times and when I started training yeah it gave me that confidence and it gave me the confidence to not have to compare myself to anybody in the room right and that alone just changed my life really changed my perspective on social interaction. Like I don't have to go into a room thinking, what is the next guy thinking about me?
Yep.
Because I'm secure with myself. And and so yeah, it was one of those things.
And so when you took that first pro fight, so how many amateur fights did you have?
I had 15 amateur fights. And I once I started training and it was just to train to just to learn the martial arts and get better. And then we had a promoter come in, and he was the owner of the gym that we were training at and the event center that we were training at. And he asked, "Okay, who here would want to fight if we had mixed martial arts fights in North Platte?" And a bunch of guys raised their hand, and everybody's looking at me like, "Why aren't you raising your hand?" And I was like, "Sure, whatever, I'll fight,"
Right.
just because I was
Peer
kind of put
pressure.
on this, yeah,
Right.
yeah, put
Right.
on the spot, and and then it really didn't click with me that I could make this a thing until I started hanging with, the amateur fighters, and I'm winning sparring rounds, I'm winning jujitsu rounds, and I'm like, oh, this guy's got a 4-0 record, like I could potentially be good at this,
Yeah.
so.
So you had your 15 amateur fights. You're doing well. At what point do you say, "Hey, maybe I can make some money doing this"?
I think I realized early that that route was like the whole getting paid route wasn't like, because I had hung around pro fighters and I'm seeing what they're getting paid, and then I'm seeing the entry level at the UFC, and I'm like, okay, this isn't terrible money, but there is routes you can go, alternative routes, you know. Um, but once I hit probably 4-0, 5-0 as a pro fighter, I was like, at that moment, I was like, UFC had been a goal since I was an amateur. Like that, I was always in my head, because I think that you should always be fully in if you're doing something. Like with fighting, I don't want to be 1 foot in, 1 foot out. You know, like if I was competing for amateur titles, like I wanted to eventually work towards a world title, and I would always say that. But I don't know if I truly believed I could do it. You know, until you win a fight that you didn't think you could win, and then you're like, okay, I could potentially pursue this. And so yeah, the whole time, you know, I was saying I want to win a world title, but don't know if I truly believed it.
Right.
But then when I was like 4-0, 5-0 as a professional, then it started to set in like, okay, yeah, I think I could make this work.
And were you still working a day job at that time? Because when I was training and working at a law firm, you know, I'd walk into work with a black eye, or you know, I'd broken my nose a couple of days before, and it was always, I feel like I was in Fight Club, because I have to explain all these injuries to, you know, the senior
Right.
partners. And so, were you working while you were? I'm sure you were, especially as an amateur. How
Mhm.
are you balancing that schedule?
Yeah, so I worked in my entire amateur career, you know, 40 hours a week. And then when I decided to fight as a pro, I I always thought, again, with the I wanted to be fully in. Like I told myself, and me and my mom had a huge argument about it, because you know, she comes from a hard working class family, and she was like, "You need to make money." But when I made my pro debut, I was like, I'm done working. I'm just going to train people, you know, do the whole personal trainer, teach people martial arts, and go from there. And it wasn't like with an intent to open a school. That happened later. I just was training at the gym that I was at, and the guy who owned it was like, "Yeah, you can train people. That's no problem." And I was like, "Awesome."
Awesome. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so then, yeah, that's what it was just me training people and training myself, and yeah, I remember as an amateur, um, losing fights, you know, losing amateur fights for titles and stuff, and then going back to work, and everybody, like, the second you lose an amateur fight, and I feel bad for amateur fighters who are taking these tough fights and, you know, losing, because, I just remember everybody being like, "Are you done yet?
Oh yeah.
Okay, have you had your fun?" It's like,
Right.
it was one of the most annoying, frustrating questions I had to deal with as an amateur. I'm
I'm
like,
sure, because they don't see what's inside of you. They don't see that, hey, I'm
yeah,
killing myself for this, and I'm going to keep going no matter what. They
yep,
think, like you said, oh, you're just having some fun. You want to test yourself out. And as soon as you lose, all right, obviously you're not good enough to be a pro. So go find a real job.
yeah, yep,
Right.
that's what they think. Yep.
So when you decide to go pro, you know, it's not like someone going pro in the NFL where it's like they have a press conference, they declare for the draft. There's a whole system for going pro in other
Mhm.
major sports. In MMA, what's that process look like from going to amateur to pro? How did you find that first pro fight?
Yeah, thankfully I had a good group of guys around me who believed in me. And we have a hometown promotion, and Russ Jones owns Midwest Championship Fighting. And it's funny you mentioned law firm, because he's a law guy,
Okay.
and so he's like probably the best lawyer here in town. And everybody, he's a really recognizable figure here in a town of 30,000 people. So him promoting fights, it was just, you know, really cool to work with him and grow a connection between him and I. And then, you know, there's other local promotions that I was fighting for and had good relationships with. So just fighting basically everybody on the regional scene and my state, and beating the guys that were, you know, relevant and doing really well, um, was kind of the goal at first, like guys I had watched growing up and guys who were fighting as pro on the regional scene, and then just kind of going after them and again having that support from Russ and Midwest Championship Fighting and then Dynasty Combat and just growing through those two promotions and then venturing off, going to King of the Cage, um, LFA, all kinds of different promotions and just kind of with becoming a pro, yeah, like you said, there's not a real blueprint in a sense. There's just you fight as many fights as you can, stay consistent because the UFC likes consistency and they like good quality opponents, right? So you build up this resume of consistency and the best opponents on the regional scene, and then eventually you go out and fight a bigger name who will get you recognized. And that was the issue for a while. I was, I think, 8-0, 9-0, and I was thinking, they should be come calling, soon enough. And they're like, we need to see you on a nationally broadcasted, event. They were telling my manager at the time, like LFA, and so we reached out to LFA, got on an LFA fight, and then the call came shortly after that. So, yeah, they need to be able to see you as well as see your stats and stuff like that.
So your manager, you're building up this pro record. You're 9-0. Your manager, does he reach out to the UFC and say, "Hey, I got this fighter who's about ready for you guys"? Is he sending I think back to I had buddies in high school who were trying to play football at the college level, and I helped them edit together highlight tapes that they would send to the colleges. Is it something like that where your manager's sending stuff to the UFC to show you off?
Yeah, very similar. So they were actually planning it on coming to Lincoln and doing a show, and then he helped with that show. My manager had at the time had helped with that show, and he's got a list full of guys that are kind of killing it on the regional scene, like Dakota Cochran. Let's see who else was there at the time. Cassius. And then I can't even remember. There's a couple other guys that he's trying to get onto that Lincoln show, and he told them, well, I got Ryan MacDonald. Do you want to put him on there? He's a good seller. Blah blah blah. And they're like, well, this is what we know about him, and this is what we want to see from him. We want to see him on a nationally broadcasted event. And so that's what we did. And then after that, I got a short notice call. So
awesome. And so was it that first fight with the UFC then that you were dealing with what happened with your brother?
Yeah. So I think that was short. I'm trying to remember timelines, but I was probably 6-0 or 7-0 at that time. And then, yeah, he came to me with the Contender Series thing. And that's when we, probably when the UFC caught notice of me and we were going to do that fight. And then my brother passed, and then making the tough decision to pull out on like a week's notice. And so from there on out, that was the longest layoff I had taken from MMA. I took I think it was a whole month off of training. And, so it's like you're trying to get back to it, get back to training, get back to fighting, and then get recognized again. So yeah, it was kind of bumpy a little bit there. And it took it's probably a year or two until they started with that Lincoln show. And then we started to talk to them again. But yeah, it was kind of bumpy.
Yeah, I'm sure. I mean, was it a tough decision to not take that UFC fight? Because this is your dream. You're waiting for this call from the UFC. They give it to you, and then you have this tragedy. Was it tough, or did you know, hey, I've got to be there for my family?
It was tough. Like super, like probably till this day, the toughest decision I've made. But I'm still thankful for it, and it's even more tough when you have your family thinking that you should have done the other thing. Like at the time, everybody just expects you to be this hero, right? And they're like, you got to do it. You got to do it for Kyle. And it's like, I'm a real emotional guy in the first place. So it's like, I know that it wouldn't have been me inside the cage, that night. And just because my head would have been so many other places. And like I said, I took that whole month after that off of the gym. So my head, if I was in the right mindset to fight, I would have been training,
Right.
And so I know that I wasn't there, even if I would have tried to channel some kind of hidden emotion to train and get through it and earn a contract. But yeah, it was super tough because they didn't exactly agree with the decision. I mean, a couple days later they did, but they're like, you got to do this, you got to do it, and I'm just like, I don't think, and again, I don't think they know how much goes into fighting because they're not fighters. They're my family, but uh, there's just so many different emotions out there, and when your head's not in the game, it's a whole different ball game, and it's scary. It's life or death. Somebody
Right.
can die out there. So
Right. It's not going to benefit you if your head's not in it and you go in and get knocked out in the first round.
yeah, exactly.
Was the UFC understanding, or they've got a million guys who are ready to step up and take the fight. So you probably didn't know if you were going to get another shot after that, right?
Yeah, I just remember being in tears and being so upset and writing out this whole text message to Mick Maynard. And I was like seconds away from sending it before my manager called me. And I was just like bawling to him about, like why I had to make the decision I made, just because, there was a whole house that needed cleaned. We needed to disperse of all his stuff, set up his funeral, and within my family, I've always been like the mediator, the strong rock that everybody comes to, brings their problems to. And I know that even if they would have wanted to, they couldn't have, they would have brought all that stuff on me anyhow.
Right.
And so I was just thankful after the fact that I got to be there for them and with everybody. And yeah, it's still it's a good memory of our last memories
Yeah.
with my brother. So
Yeah. It's weird how like tragedy can bring you closer together. It gives you something
Mhm.
the rest of the family to unite over, and it's almost it's like the last gift that he gives the families that
Yeah.
there's this event that happens that you guys can come together over, and it's a weird human thing that it takes something like that to bring people closer together. You took a month off of training. Was there a moment when you said, "All right, I gotta get back into this," or what was it that made you get started again?
Probably, and those same guys I spoke about earlier, Taylor McKeeman, he's just a great student, great training partner, just a great guy in general. But I remember being there and like contemplating if, like, just being so down in the dumps and contemplating if, like, even running a school was what I wanted to do. And I remember it was tough times, like where again, we come from a small town, so it's tough to get people in the door, and it's tough to pay the bills when your membership at the time was only like 45 bucks, 50 bucks, and the rent's due, and like all I could want to do was sit at home and mourn the death of my brother. So uh, yeah, it was a team effort, and the fact that Taylor kind of rounded up everybody as far as my gym, and he I didn't ask him to do it, and I didn't expect nobody to do it, but he rounded up memberships. He made sure that the place stayed open. I honestly probably at that point wouldn't have had the money to pay for rent and stuff like that, and yeah, he rounded up the money from all the students, and he came to me with a bunch of money for rent and was like, here, this is what, yeah, and we lived together, we were
Yeah.
roommates, and so like yeah, he's just an incredible guy for doing that and looking after me. I mean, he loves the gym as much as I do, and he has been there since the beginning. So I'm sure he was how I am now. Like, I'm never gonna let this thing go. Like, there's been so many times for it to go with COVID and that and just so many other times that um, and God's got us through it. That's the only reason. There's so many times where I'm like, I'm not sure I'm gonna pay the rent, and a buddy of mine just reaches out, hey, I want to help, blah blah blah. It's like
Man.
it's yeah, some of the craziest things.
Well, it's a testament to how you are as a coach and a friend of that people are willing to do that. That not everyone has people in their lives who can step up like that or who want to step up like that. So that's something you've done, something you've created. And we
Well,
didn't even talk about when in your career did you decide you wanted to open up your own gym? Where did that come in?
yeah, so that was kind of a forced thing. With the gym we were at, was called Top Tier, and they're still around here in town. But it's not a real competitive gym anymore. We were training and I was coaching like the MMA fighters and me and the gym owner just had some disagreements on certain things. I had trained at gyms all over the country and kind of had seen the blueprint for how you should train. What we should be doing on a day basis, and then how the big thing for me was how normal people, like normal everyday people who just want to learn martial arts, how they should be involved in the gym too. And I remember day one guys coming in and getting to spar with the fighters, spar hard with the fighters, and it's like that should never be a thing. Like, there was just too many people getting hurt and never coming back, and it was just talk around town that we were the big bullies just picking on everybody. And for me, it was just like, we need a team practice with our fight team, and then we can have our normal everyday basics class. If the fighters want to go to basics class, that's fine. They have to be mindful of who they're training alongside and take care of everybody. But that's how it should be ran. And so we just had a couple disagreements on how I thought things should go, and I tried to sit down and kind of explain my point of view and hear his out, and it just didn't mesh. And so at one point I just decided, he came to me and he was like, well, if you because I he told me that I could run class the way that I had wanted to, and then I came up and he must have gave it a second thought. But when I came up to the gym and decided to run it that way, he was like, "If you don't need this gym, then get out of here." And so I ended up doing so, and I remember, I think, like 10 guys walking out of practice with
Wow.
me, leaving like two or three left in the gym, and I lived in a two-bedroom apartment at the time, and there was 13 guys, 14 guys in my apartment just sitting there like, "What are we doing next, coach? What are we doing?" And I'm like, "Okay, I'm opening a gym, I guess."
Oh, that's
With
awesome.
no money, no real money, I'm like, "What are we gonna do?"
So how'd you do it? I mean, where'd you get the initial money to get the gym going?
Again, it's another one of those unspeakable things that just happened, right? Like, I remember 2 days after I left the gym, a buddy of mine, Nick Sutton from Kearney, which is 90 miles down the road, he called me and said, "Hey, do you know anybody who needs wrestling mats?" And I was like, "How do these things happen?" It's just blessings.
Yeah.
And so I made a post shortly after I had wrestling mats, and I'm like, anybody know about, an open area? And because at the time, I think I was 23, 24 years old, I didn't know how to open a business. And so I was just like, anybody know about somewhere to rent and stuff like that. And that's
Yeah.
how we got it going. A lady messaged me from there and was like, "We got this building. It's really rough around the edges. You'll have to work on it, but you don't have to pay the first 2 months." And I didn't have any money, so I was like, "Perfect,
Deal. Right.
let's do it." And yep,
Oh, that's
it all
awesome.
worked itself out.
Well, and again, I think it's you, your personality, and the culture you created. Because, like you said, the culture of the gym really, really matters in terms of its success. I got lucky. The first gym that I trained at, University Grappling in Utah, we had professional fighters at that gym, and they would train with the white belts, but they understood, hey, you're training with white belts, you're training with guys who have day jobs, who aren't doing this for a career.
Mm-hmm.
You don't go 100% with these guys, and that was the culture. It was,
Yep.
you're here to help. If you're a pro fighter and training with white belts, you're there to teach them. Even if you're not the instructor for the class, you're there to teach them. If
Right.
not, go to the fight class.
Right.
But that culture was strict, and it permeated every class, and every member at that gym. They understood this is how you're going to behave when you're in these classes. And it makes it so easy as a new guy coming in to be like, man, I'm learning from these pro fighters.
Makes you
And
feel super welcome.
exactly, you feel super welcome, and you feel like, wow, it's cool. I'm training with pro fighters.
Yeah.
There's everyone benefits from it, and
Mm-hmm.
it makes you want to go see their fights now. And I'm going to fight every weekend now to watch these guys because they're my guys.
Mm-hmm.
And that culture is so huge. And I, like you said, I think especially these guys with this old school mentality, like you said, if you don't want to be here, then leave.
Yep.
It's like, fine, we'll
Yeah.
do it, and we'll do it the right way. So
I was talking about it this morning too, and it's unfortunate that it happened that way. Like, I wish that we could all come together, because we need all the training partners we can get in a town of 30,000,
Sure.
But I remember them saying, they're only going to last till December. We opened in October of 2016, and they're only going to last till December. And 5 years later, yeah, we're still kicking it.
I love that. And
Yeah.
you had a huge contingent come out to Fort Wayne, Indiana from Nebraska. I mean, again, it's just a testament to
Mhm.
your success and the culture you've created, that so many guys came out to watch you fight. And
Yeah.
they were great guys. I mean, it was cool talking to them.
Mhm.
So let's talk about, you had to turn down the Contender Series fight, deal with your brother's death. You took a little bit of a break. Then you took a couple fights outside the UFC. Again, you built your record up. I think you were 10-0,
Mhm.
and then the UFC comes calling again. Were you expecting that next call? Or how did that work out?
Yeah, I mean, a little bit. I was gonna fight another LFA fight after the last one, and I was dealing with like some back injuries and like a herniated disc, and so I decided, because of like numbness, like there was numbness all the way down like the back of my spine, in my low back, that I was like, we'll hold off on that LFA fight. And so my manager called me, and he told me, he was like, okay, so I know we spoke about not fighting LFA, right? He was like, because it was coming up in like 2 or 3 months, the LFA show was, and he's like, but what if there's a bigger call? And I was like, what are we talking? He's like fighting in Nashville. I can't even remember the date, but it was sometime in March. He's like, fighting in Nashville in March. And then I was like, well, like, what promotion, And then he's like, well, UFC. And I was like, we can get healthy.
Yeah, we'll make it work.
I was like, yeah, we can get healthy. And it was on Valentine's Day that he called. The fight was like 5 weeks from Valentine's Day. So I was like, yeah, we'll get healthy, and we'll make it happen. And yeah, we did so. And unfortunately it didn't go the way, that I had wanted it to. But I learned so much just from that experience that I think in the long run, I'm going to be super happy with, the cards that I was dealt, for sure.
What was the feeling of being at a UFC event? Like, is it an entirely different atmosphere from what you experienced before? Is it similar? How does the UFC compare to the other promotions?
Yeah. Yeah. Everything's lined up for you. There's no real uncertainties. And I remember, on the regional scene, where you're in say a lower level promotion, and they don't have itineraries, and they don't have really much of anything for you to do. You don't really know. You have to message the promoter when you show up in town and be like, hey, where are our hotels? Like stuff like that. And there's been even times with shadier promotions where you show up and you expect your hotel, because that's how the game, you're supposed to get travel pay. and lodging, and they'll be like, oh, well, we didn't discuss that. And it's like, that's we shouldn't have to discuss that.
Right.
That should be a part of the fight, um
Has that happened to you where
oh yeah.
you showed up and they didn't have a hotel for you, and so
Yep.
you just have to pay it out of pocket?
Yep. Yeah. Yeah, so it's one of those things, and you'll never fight for that promotion again,
Yeah.
obviously, right? But the UFC is, there's none of that. You walk in, and from the moment you walk into the hotel, you're dealt with, or even when you show up at the airport, you're met by a UFC representative and their athletes relations people, and they're super nice, and they just have everything lined up for you. They give you their phone number right off the bat, like, if you need anything, here it is. So they get a bad rap, but they definitely know what they're doing in this game, and there's no uncertainties for sure.
Yeah. Oh, that's awesome. So
Mhm.
you had a second fight with UFC, also didn't go your way. Did you end up did they just say, "Hey, we're dropping you at this point"? What happened after that second fight?
Yeah, that one was probably the most tough for me, just because it was very similar to how I got knocked down in this last fight. And I'm not one to like really like dwell on getting a rematch, but if there was any rematch in my career that I would want, it would be Louis Smolka.
Yeah.
And that, yeah, it was just such a moment for me that I was like, I was still in that fight. I remember getting put down, and again that same focus was in my eyes that I had on Saturday, and I hooked his leg like as if to go for like a De La Hiva, uh, in the nogi. Like, it's not as strong, an outside De La Hiva, but I was still thinking that clearly, to hook and inside hook with my foot. Like, if you're hurt and you can't fight, I don't think that that's coming,
Yeah.
straight to memory. Most people would just look like a deer in the headlights and don't know where they're at. But if you go back and watch the fight, you can definitely tell how in I was. And I remember thinking, oh, we're grappling now. Like, I remember that in my head, like, oh, okay, cool, we're grappling now. And yeah, the ref, they're new to the UFC as well. It was a Vancouver ref,
Okay.
so I'm sure, just like it is with fighters, like, it's your big moment to shine. Uh, that is their job too, and it's their. I'm fairly certain it was one of his first events for the UFC, and I can't blame him for it. But I think he jumped the gun a little bit. Uh, but before the even getting dropped, that's probably the best I've ever felt in the cage, and so during the whole fight, I was just having so much fun. And then there's not many moments where you get clipped in my career where I've gotten clipped and still want to throw down. And like, I was still fight rather than flight in that situation. And I was still trying, and that's probably why I got put down. But when I got rocked, I was still throwing at him, and just having so much fun. And again, feeling the best I had ever felt inside that cage. And yeah, so it was tough for the referee to jump in that early, but it is what it is.
Yeah, I know. That hurts. It hurts when you feel like, okay, I can
Mhm.
take a loss when I've been beaten, but when I feel like I'm still
Yep.
going and the ref jumps in, you're like,
Mhm.
oh, come on, I still had fight in me.
Yep.
The first UFC fight, were you still dealing with the back injuries? Like, do you feel like, hey, maybe I shouldn't have taken this fight, or I wish I at least had more time to recover from the back injury?
I think I wouldn't really pin it on that. I think I was more out of shape because of the back
Okay.
injury. Like, I think I was in a good point to where it was starting to get more healthy, but I hadn't really trained hard in quite some time. And like, the difference between me not fighting sick, because I haven't fought in 2 years, right? And this last fight, I had trained those entire 2 years. It's not
Yeah.
like I had like was training once a week, or like, this last 2 years I was training nearly every day. And before that fight with Chris, yeah, when with the back injury, you have to let things heal up. You can still afford to train maybe once a week or something, you know get in where you fit in type of workouts
Sure.
that aren't going to hurt the back. But yeah, I was definitely not in the greatest shape to start camp.
Yeah. So after the Smolka fight, how does that conversation with the UFC go? Did you sign any kind of multi-fight contract, or was it the one fight, then you signed the second fight, and then after the second fight, do they just say we're not going to sign you to the next one? How does that all work out?
So you sign a 4-fight deal, and in the contract they can terminate your contract at any moment. So yeah, that's what happened. I was scheduled to fight 4 times, and I think it's like I think they have to offer you a certain amount of fights per year, something
Okay.
like that. But yeah, it's a 4-fight deal, and they have to offer however many fights per year. And after that second fight, I was expecting it a little bit because you hear about the 0-2 and you're
Right.
out type of stuff in the UFC. So like I was really hard on myself, and I remember calling my manager and like telling him like, "Hey, get on the phone with Mick and tell him how much this means to me. Like, give me one more. Like, like." But yeah, they made their decision, and so hey, I had to live with it. But
So
again, it's not like with the UFC. I enjoyed my time there. I learned a lot about myself, but like I don't need the UFC, right? I don't think anybody needs the UFC. But there's a lot of people that see it that way, like that's the end all be all for fighting. I'm glad that there's other promotions, and there might be other promotions that fit me better personally because I'm not the boisterous shit talking guy, that's gonna give the UFC their headlines, right? Um, so like one championship, they're kind of more my style, real respectful and stuff like that. And the martial arts honor, and so there's other places out there, but I'd be lying if I didn't say I would like to fight for the UFC
sure.
again because it was such an awesome experience.
And you're not locked into any additional fights with the UFC. Once they let you go off that 4-fight contract, even if you only did 2 fights, you can go with Bellator 1 or PFL
Right.
anywhere you want to after that. Okay. Oh,
Yep.
that's good. That's interesting to know.
Hmm.
So, yeah, I wanted to ask you about your style because I've seen, yeah, you're not the brash. You're not, Colby Covington's fighting tonight. Everyone knows his personality. Conor McGregor, obviously. You're more George St. Pierre. You just kind of
Hmm.
let the fighting speak for itself. Is that a conscious decision you make, or you just say, "Hey, this is just my personality. I'm not a brash guy. I'm not going to try to pretend to be one just to try to get more eyeballs."
Yeah, I mean, I like the showmanship type of stuff. Like, I don't necessarily like the I don't know, trash talking mid fight. I think like a guy like what's that Kevin? What's Kevin's last
Kevin
name?
Lee.
No, the 85-pounder that's been talking in his fights, but he's real funny.
I don't.
I think
I keep thinking Kelvin Gastelum, but that's not. No.
is it
Kevin.
Kevin? I can't remember.
I'll have to pull it up after.
Yeah. Anyways, like the real funny guys, like having a good time. Like you don't have to like talk. Like I remember it. I can't remember what I was saying to Willie, but in the third round when I took him down, I said something like I was on top of him, and I was like something about how much fun this is, and sorry for hitting him and stuff like that. Like just fun
Right.
gamesmanship, and I do my Dragon Ball Z Kamehameha and like just stuff that like gets the crowd involved and fun. Like I don't want to go in there and be a Fedor, like a robot, and
Right.
like I feel like that's kind of boring, right? Uh, but I enjoy people enough to not get so invested in, oh, he's trying to take my paycheck, oh, he's trying to take food off my table. Like that's not my personality, right? And I don't get offended because somebody signed a contract. Like I fight my best friends literally every day,
Right.
so like why would I just start talking crap to him because they're training with me, like
Sure.
this doesn't make sense, but
Sure. So you mentioned you took 2 years off between the last UFC fight and this fight last week. And obviously there was COVID in the middle that threw everyone off their schedule. Was that the main reason why there was such a big break for you, or was there something else?
yeah, COVID, I mean, with all there is to talk about with COVID, it was mainly the gym and getting, you know, the funds to keep it open and try and stay busy with, you know, personals and to just to keep the doors open because, I remember days where there was people sitting outside our door, and when Taylor, that same student I talked about who cornered me, he walked into the gym and some lady was like, "Hey, what are you guys doing in there?"
Oh God.
He's like, "We're doing jujitsu." Like, he's like, "We're practicing social distancing," and she's like, Well, I'll send my son over there. I think he'd like it. It's like,
Okay.
yeah. So people just, yeah, being real weird
Yeah,
and,
be
and
careful. Yeah.
yeah, sketchy and trying to.
What a weird time, man. Like
It
to have
was.
to worry about your neighbors ratting you out just feels like how you just don't expect that to happen in America.
Yeah, yeah, it was wild. But we got through it, and now the gym is prospering more than it ever has,
That's
and I don't
awesome.
have to worry about paying rent every month. Like I remember there was times where I'm like, okay, I need to figure out something. I need to loan some money from my parents, and just all over the place, and those were challenges as it is. And I remember fighting, and if I didn't make my win purse, I was thinking, oh shoot, like we're going under.
Yeah.
And so yeah, that was the whole thing was COVID, and thankfully I had my good group of guys that stayed through it, and they weren't worried about getting sick, and so at one point we had to move our jujitsu practices to my garage, and because people were getting weird that we were still rolling, and so yeah, we did jujitsu in the garage, but we stayed open the entire time and did kickboxing and stuff like that. So
Oh, that's
yeah, it was
awesome.
tough.
So, yeah, if anyone who's in the North Platte area, obviously, I mean, Ryan, just his fighting style is a style that you want to emulate. And again, I talked to guys from your gym. They're just great guys. I think they'd be great guys to train with. So anyone in the North Platte area, check out the gym. Am I pronouncing it right? Is it? I know it's a play on your zip code, 691 on one. Is that right?
Yep,
Great.
perfect.
Ryan, oh, before we go, I do have to ask you. So UFC 268 is tonight. Do you have picks for the fight?
Yes. Let's see. So Gaethje's actually trained at my gym.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, Justin's awesome guy. So I'm gonna have to take the bias choice for that and go with
That's
Justin.
fair.
But I'm a real big fan of Rose. Obviously, I talked about her. So I'd like to see those two win. I know it's kind of conflicting for me to be the guy I am and want Colby to win. But I do like Colby because of similar reasons, right? He was on the verge of getting cut,
Yep.
and then now he brought out this old school wrestling persona. And so to me, more than anything, it's funny.
Yeah.
I don't really like the comments about Kamaru's dad and stuff, and like he does make some stupid comments, but I do like Colby's fighting style, and I have watched a couple videos of him training with amateurs, and you like really get a lot of respect for Colby for taking care of his team, and he's at like a kind of a smaller team now, but like he really works well with the amateurs and takes care of them and teaches them and yeah, if you haven't seen it, go check out Colby's sparring rounds with his amateur teammates. It's really cool.
Yeah, I haven't seen those. I'll have to watch that. I feel the same exact way about Colby. Like I grew up with the old school martial arts mentality. As I
Yeah,
love GSP and those guys, but I also love a good heel. And I think there's so
yeah,
few guys in the UFC. It seems like who are happy being the heel, happy being the bad guy.
right.
And Colby takes that and runs with it. So it's as long as you can just laugh at it and have fun with it. He's just a really entertaining guy. So I'm
For
100%
sure.
with you. Do you have anything coming up? Do you have any fights planned? What's your future look like?
Yeah, so not necessarily. I just plan on taking a couple months off just to heal my brain. And then Artist Scrap, man, they've done a great job. I'm really good friends with Mike Lee, the owner, and he's actually affiliating with us for jujitsu. So we're gonna have the same jiu-jitsu tie, um, they're just great people, and they know what they're doing as far as marketing, and yeah, their show's killing it. So hopefully bring some guys out to their show. MCF, we're here in North Platte, Midwest Championship Fighting. I actually match make for Midwest Championship Fighting. Yeah, so I'm not matchmaking this card because I obviously fought, but uh, we there's some really good fights on that show. So if you can check out Midwest Championship Fighting, there's a couple belts behind me from when I fought and competed here in my hometown. But yeah, give them a like and a follow, because their event on Veterans Day is going to be awesome, and I'm excited for that. But enough rambling. I'll probably fight in the next 5 or 6 months.
Awesome. Awesome. And I have to give a shout out to Art of Scrap as well, because they put on such a professional production, man. I was impressed the entire time. It
just show too, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. The show was great. It felt like a professional event. So it was really cool to be there and see what they did. Where can people find you online? I know what's your Twitch stream. Give me that.
Yeah. I think it is let's see. Main Event Mac, I believe.
Okay.
Let me check.
Your Main Event Mac on Instagram, right?
Yeah, I believe all my handles are Main Event Mac.
Okay. Yep. Okay. Yeah. Well, Ryan, hey, I appreciate your time, man. Again, I'm looking forward to following you the rest of your career. Yeah. You're a great fighter. You're a great guy. I'm glad your gym's doing well. I hope it continues to do well, man.
Awesome. Thank you. Yeah, we'll have to do this again sometime.
Absolutely. I would love that. All right. Talk soon.